Well, hello, it's me, Mrs Blackwell. I'm here to talk to you about the books that I read in October. Now, October has been a fantastic reading month for me. I enjoyed absolutely everything that I read, and so if you see it in this video, you can consider it a Mrs Blackwell's recommends. I'm back in the US. I'm filming this at one of my favorite US bookstores at Dudley's in Bend, Oregon. And one thing I noticed when I picked up my reading stack is that every single book has a different jacket here in the US, or a different cover, than it has at home in New Zealand. And I thought I'd briefly explain why that happens. So books are sold with rights to certain countries or certain territories. And one of the most common ways that this falls is rights for North America and rights for the UK and all other English-speaking countries. So New Zealand almost always ends up with the same cover as the UK. There's a lot of debate online about why this happens and what the tastes are of each different territory. I will just tell you my impression from here on the ground. The US jackets tend to be brighter and more abstract, and the UK and the New Zealand jackets tend to be darker, more muted, and we seem to favour realism for some reason. So actually a personal pet peeve of mine that jacket designers put photos of main characters on fiction books. We have great imaginations, we're readers, we really don't need this signpost, but they do it anyway. Regardless of my pet peeve and the feelings of each nation or each market, what the jacket designers are really trying to do in all cases is give you a little bit of a signpost about what the book might be about and what kind of reader it's for. So these first two books I'm going to hold up are not books that I read, they're just examples I want to give. It's one of the reasons that you might find in a lot of romance has got these pastels, these scripty fonts, these very feminine looking covers. If you've never read any Hannah Grace, or you have read her and you're looking for other books like that, the jacket designer wants you to give you a little hint that this might be something like the kind of book that you would like. Same with science fiction and fantasy, a lot of metallics, a lot of serifed fonts and dark colours. Again, this is the type of book that a science fiction reader might like. And now moving on to a book that I did read, and another good example, literary fiction. Literary fiction tends to use a lot of these old mastery kind of painterly images. I guess it's a little bit of a hint that this is contemplative and a little bit of a work to read. One last thing before I start about this book. So see how it says here, a novel? I almost never see that at home, but it's actually very common to see on the hardcover edition of books here in the US. I like it. So the Safekeep, Yael van der Wouden. This is, if you're a literary fiction reader who likes books that mess with good and evil, your sense of right and wrong, and really mess up your feelings about characters as the book goes along, then you should definitely put this on your to be read list. One of the masterful things about this book is that a lot of the signposts are also reveals for the plot. So I'm going to be really careful about what I tell you about this story, but I'll tell you the basics. So Isabel is a woman living a really reclusive interior sort of life on the eastern side of the Netherlands. She lives in a home that was bought for her family at the end of World War II, so we're set in 1961. She lives in this home that was bought for her family by her uncle, and her mother has died and she's living there alone, but it's known within the family that the house will go to her older brother Louis when he decides to settle down and start a family. As it happens, Louis is a bit of a playboy, so Isabel's not really worried that he's going to be coming for the house anytime soon. And then one day Louis rings up and asks her if his current girlfriend Eva could come and stay for a while Louis is away for work. So Eva and Isabel are the total opposite kind of people. Eva sleeps in late, she's kind of messy, she touches things, and from here on the tension of the story really builds. I absolutely love this book. I have a history of being spectacularly wrong about the Booker Prize. This is a finalist, but if I had to pick, it would be this or Percival James Everett as the winner. Let's find out in November. Also on the subject of the Booker Prize, this is the 6th and last shortlisted title that I've read for this year's Booker Prize. This is Anne Michael's Held. Anne is a poet, she's a Canadian poet. That comes through in the book, both in the style of the writing as well as how the book has been laid out. You probably can't see it very well on here, but it is almost laid out like stanza with very small little clips throughout the story. It's a challenging read. It moves back and forward in time. It also moves in between things happening in the present, memories, hallucinations, letters. It is a book that you're going to want to read when you've got your wits about you, but if you love poetry, I think this is a novel that you will really love. Memorial Day is by Geraldine Brooks. This is an advance copy. This book comes out in New Zealand in January, in the US in February. Geraldine Brooks will be known to many people here as the author of the book Horse. That was a fictionalization of the true story of the Kentucky thoroughbred Lexington. The book just did phenomenally well. If you haven't read it, also add that to your to-be-read list. What you probably didn't know about the book is that Geraldine, at the time she was finishing the book in 2019, her 60-year-old, completely healthy husband dropped dead literally on the side of a street. So this book moves between that moment and in the days and weeks that followed, and 3 years later when she's taken herself to a remote part of Tasmania to grieve. So she focuses a lot on the fact that in Western culture we don't really have a ritual around death and grief, especially if it's someone close to us at exactly the time when we're supposed to be grieving. We're embroiled in an avalanche of paperwork and administration and plans for this person's death. So she talks a lot about that, and then she also flips over to this time she's spending in Tasmania, and it's sort of a closing door moment, sliding doors moment for her, where before she'd met her husband, she'd considered joining this sort of activist group in Tasmania, and so she went there to see what would have life been like if she would have taken that road instead of staying in the US with her husband. I didn't know that Geraldine Brooks was Australian, so that was something else that I learned in the reading of this book. I think that whenever I read lists of new books that are coming out, there's almost like a glut around grief books. However, this book would be specifically interesting, I think, to women who have lost their spouse, and of course the writing is beautiful. This will definitely be up there in one of those very special, important grief books. You will absolutely cry your eyes out, so be prepared for that. And in a small book, I cried at least a dozen times. Meditations for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman. We'll just have a really quick observation lesson. When I was reading the catalogue for this, I read this, Meditation for Mortals. That is a very different book to Meditations for Mortals. I should have known better because Oliver Burkeman's book 4,000 Weeks was my #1 favourite book of 2021, and I should have known better than to think that he would write a book about meditation. The book is set out as 28 short essays covering a lot of the same material that was in 4,000 Weeks, but also with some new stuff and some updates. It has a focus on making the content of 4,000 Weeks really actionable, and so you should read one little essay over 28 days. This book is out, it has an entirely different jacket in New Zealand, and if you're looking for something to get your new year kick-started, put this one on your list for centre. The Way of the Hermit by Ken Smith. This book really, this was another one that had me in tears several times throughout the course of the month. So this is a story of Ken's early life in the 50s and 60s in the UK. He grew up in a really tough working class family and neighbourhood, and in the 70s he was really brutally attacked out of nowhere and ended up in the hospital. During his recovery, he got to thinking about what he wanted from his life, and he decided to get out of the UK and go and live in the Yukon, which is where Canada joins Alaska, and learn survival skills. For probably immigration reasons, he couldn't stay in Canada forever, so in the 80s he moved back to the UK, and he managed to get himself situated in the Scottish Highlands. He came to an agreement with an estate owner that he could build a house on the estate in exchange for work. I found it really, the romantic in me found this book quite sad because at no point was there a Mrs. Hermit, and I was kind of rooting for it because Ken was such a nice guy. But what this book does do is try to dispel the myth that a hermit is a person who hates society and holds any kind of extremist views. He doesn't have any of those things. He's just a genuinely good guy who likes to live on his own and really simply. The Way of the Hermit. And my last book for October, actually didn't read all 850 pages in October. This is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, the winner of the 1986 Pulitzer Prize. I read this as part of the Bookshop Thomasville Conquer a Classic program. We read a bunch of chapters every month from February to now. And this is an American classic. This is a Western. Just a hint for Kiwis, be careful whether you refer to Texas as the West or the South. This is a hornet's nest of hot debate, which I didn't know. But this is a Western. This is a cowboy story set in Texas. Cole and Gus are attempting to move a huge number of cattle all the way up to Montana, and the story is that if you get to Montana, you get some land, you get to have that land and it's yours, and that's their mission. This is a huge cast of characters. They come and go and the story intermingles. If you want to conquer a classic, definitely try this one. Or in November, the Bookshelf Thomasville is going to announce the 2025 Conquer a Classic. It'll be a whole new book. We don't know what it'll be. Your guess is as good as mine. That was my reading list for October. Thanks for joining me. See you in November.